I myself experienced stigma and discrimination because of my epilepsy. I experienced my first seizure in college and was dismissed and told that it was just stress. After several more seizures, I finally received a diagnosis of epilepsy and was placed on the anticonvulsant drug Dell. The drug's side effects greatly diminished my quality of life. And at the time, I didn't have the language to ask for alternative treatment. But I simply asked if there was something else that I could do. My then neurologist told me, which included the biased statement, that I could go on long-term disability because, of course, I was on some type of other financial assistance. I also experienced discrimination in the workforce when my employer told me after having a breakthrough seizure due to a viral infection that had affected my medication levels, that I could no longer park in the parking lot because I was a liability. Although my physician in the state of Pennsylvania said otherwise. Because of the incidences like this, I have felt stigmatized and ashamed. But my story is just one story, one of many stories in our community. There are numerous people who have felt the stigma that an epilepsy diagnosis brings due to a lack of awareness and resources to better understand the epilepsies and provide timely diagnosis and treatment. Today's briefing is a joint effort of the Epilepsy Caucus and the epilepsy organizations. We are speaking with one voice to say the time for more attention and investment in epilepsies is urgent. There is a letter signed by 54 organizations on your chairs, urging specific funding levels for epilepsy programs and research in the final 2024 federal budget. Our speakers will illustrate why these investments are needed. We have representatives from many congressional offices and federal agencies here today, and we thank you for your time, partnership, and increased interest in learning more. We also thank epilepsy champions and their partners who are joining us virtually today, including former Congressman and primary author of the American for Disability Act, Tony Coelho. Hi, Tony, if you're out there. We are delighted to be joined by our co-chairs of the inaugural Congressional Epilepsy Caucus, Congressman Greg Murphy and Jim Costa, launched the bipartisan Epilepsy Caucus at the end of February to raise awareness and understanding about the epilepsies, implement meaningful legislation, and advocate for epilepsy funding in Congress. First, please help me welcome Congressman and Dr. Greg Murphy of North Carolina's 3rd District, and then with her from Congressman Jim Costa of California's 21st.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you. Thank you all for coming today and shedding light on what we are trying to do for those who suffer from epilepsy and those who take care of individuals who have epilepsy. I will tell you, I think we're on the verge of groundbreaking as far as new medicines and new therapies. Just having a wonderful visit with the Costas. We spoke a little bit about AI as we march forward on this new, absolutely new horizon of medicine. And we hope that not only in the last, with what we've seen in the last decade, if even the last 5 years in breakthrough therapies in so many different diseases, that with this new frontier of AI, that we're going to experience the same types of things, even more revolutionary in so many different disorders, especially now with what we're talking about with epilepsy. It will make a world of difference. The aim is always a cure. It's always a cure. Management is great, but the cure is best. And so that's what we're trying to pour research and pour widely sought after dollars to pour to try to get those things that are lead us to a cure, a true cure for this large myriad of disorders that we call, quote, epilepsy. Many of you know my story personally. My 14-year-old son, Matthew, we were actually up in Alaska, had a nice little family vacation, and my wife and I were in another room, and my other son came running into the room. Matt had his first grand mal seizure, and Parker came in and said, "Dad, I think Matt's dead." It was not a good day. It started out a long journey, 7 months of trying this medicine, that medicine, and going from doctor to doctor. And finally, we found something that worked. And now he's 29 and is a race engineer in NASCAR. It's great. He's still very eligible bachelor. And so manipulating are of that age. I have a phone number and I'll be happy to. I need one of you to walk up to him because he's very shy and say, "Hey Matt, you are my boyfriend." But with that, Matt has done well. It was tragic. It was tough for a time. It was very, very tough. We had a doctor who had the personality of a doorstop and the compassion to meet that, and I think the competency of the same. But we found somebody who was great, and he has been Matt has been flourishing ever since. And so I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I know I can speak for Representative Costa that this is a passion of ours. We want to make every day the next better step for us, for those who suffer and deal with epilepsy and their families. So I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I will tell you, in all truthful honesty, I think sometimes it's a God thing in this world. I did not pick the purple tie. And I looked in all my ties this morning. I said, how about purple for today? And it all worked out. So anyway, thank you all very much. We will keep fighting. We'll keep working, and we're all in this together. So thank you all very much.
For Costa, everybody.
Thank you, and good morning. It's very important what we're all doing here, and the gravity of that, and we think of the challenges that we face with ensuring that we provide support, as the good doctor indicated, with his own experiences with his family. And all of our experiences, because each and every one of us have an experience that brings us here this morning, is a reflection of I think the resourcefulness, passion that we all have toward dealing with challenges of epilepsy. I'm Jim Costa, and I'm from California. I represent large parts of the San Joaquin Valley. I have the honor and the privilege to represent wonderful people there, as my colleague does from his constituency. And we know there are 3.4 million Americans, including 470,000 children, more or less, teenagers, people of all ages living with epilepsy. The financial burdens makes it obviously difficult because it's uneven in terms of the resources people have available to deal with this difficult challenge, the disease. And so we're here today and we're focusing on Epilepsy Awareness Month because it's important that we let the American public understand that this disease knows no boundaries, no levels of people can find themselves in a position where they might find themselves devastated. I will share a personal experience. I believe that my friends participating, I first became aware of epilepsy when I was 21. A young intern working here in Washington, D.C. And, like a lot of interns wanting to do your best and the whole world opening up to you and understanding how this process worked. And a person who I had a lot of respect for came grew up in a similar background that I did. And so I thought, well, gee, this is a role model. This is an example that you can come from a rural community, be the son of immigrants, Portuguese dairy farmers, knowing how to milk cows and all the things that go with that. Actually, a very wonderful way to grow up as a kid and have opportunities that you would never think of growing up at that farm. My friend and mentor was at that time the chief of staff of our congressman, who I was interning for, Congressman B.F. Sisk. This gentleman, as many of you know, is Tony Quillo. He was diagnosed with epilepsy when he was 22 years of age. As Tony has told me, and I suspect shared with many of you, it was a very dark moment for him. He was devastated. He had all sorts of career plans. He thought about entering the priesthood as he was Loyola. And the priest asked him to take a month or a semester off to really kind of reconcile, because his whole world had shattered. He related that story because I'd never met anyone who had epilepsy. A lot of people go through life and you just don't have that experience. And I'm looking at this gentleman who's the chief of staff and had been rumored to have other higher aspirations, which he did, and he was successful. But Tony Quillo was very upfront. He told staff, he told interns coming, I have epilepsy. And his matter-of-factness really demonstrated to me that, notwithstanding having a very devastating disease, that you can respond and you can rebound. And many of you have experiences like that. You have experiences either yourselves or with family members or friends. And so he didn't stop there. Obviously, he ran for Congress. And he became part of an effort with Senator Harkin and Bob Dell and others to help author the American for Disabilities Act. And as a result of that, we benefit today. His work inspired me to work with my congressman and to work with all of you to help put together this Congressional Epilepsy Caucus, which is important because we work together in a coalition to advocate here in our nation's capital on legislation and working with the appropriate government agencies, whether it's the Food and Drug Administration, whether it's efforts to deal with research, to get research dollars, to really put together experts to implement meaningful legislation, to advocate for continued research. So therefore, each and every one of you are part of this Congressional Epilepsy Caucus, and we're focusing on breaking the stigma that sadly is still with many out there for those who suffer with epilepsy, and giving a much needed voice in our nation's capital. So I hope this congressional briefing, I didn't mean to interrupt our panel. I just came from a devastating briefing, which witnessing the body cams and the photos of the October 7th massacre. So I am very, very somber this morning about everything. But this briefing, I hope, will provide you with greater understanding and awareness about the issues affecting the epileptic community throughout our country and around the world, because America can be a leader, and we are a leader in terms of our efforts. So in honor of the National Epilepsy Awareness Month, I want to encourage all of you, and for staff members who are here, encourage your members to become a part of this caucus, and so that we can continue to work together in a bipartisan fashion. I want to thank our partners, the panelists who are here, the Epilepsy Foundation, the Epilepsy Action Network, Partners Against Mortality and Epilepsy, and the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. Last year, I was really motivated and visiting one of 5 Valley Children's hospitals in California, the one in our area in the San Joaquin Valley. And it's a wonderful children's hospital that provides so much care for children throughout our San Joaquin Valley. But they've started a program some 2 years ago to deal with epileptic disorders with children and to deal with research and to deal with treatment. And I was motivated and I was impressed to see the work at the Valley Children's Hospital in the San Joaquin Valley, knowing that in our area, we're trying to add value to the work that you're doing here today. So let's be clear as I close. Your work does not go unnoticed. Your work makes a difference to each and every one of us and to all of the almost 4 million Americans and the 470,000 children who still have hope and dreams and aspirations, just as Tony Quill did when he was 22 years old and thought, my gosh, my world's collapsed. Well, his world didn't collapse. Tony is 80 years young, I know. Sorry to give away your age, Tony. But he and I communicate regularly, and he is still a voice of encouragement and motivation for all of us who know him. Try to continue to do the right thing. And each and every one of you are doing the right thing. So keep up the good work, and thank you so very much.
Murphy, do you mind coming up for pictures? I know you do have to go. And then we continue on. Sorry.
Where will it take?
Yeah, or you stand over by the counter. Closer by the podium. There we go. Yeah, you're in there.
There we go.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you. We're so grateful for the wonderful support of Congressman Murphy and Congressman Costa. We cannot thank you enough for the work that you've done on our behalf. Thank you so much. Since the caucus was launched in February, we now have 32 bipartisan members. And we urge all of your representatives to join as well. We put Congressman Murphy and Costa staff person's name and email addresses on the slide. Please contact them in order to join the Epilepsy Caucus. Before we start our panel, we are fortunate to have another important guest with us today. Director of the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke at the National Institute of Health, Dr. Walter Koroshetz. NINDS plays a critical role in epilepsy research, and we are pleased that Dr. Koroshetz is with us today to provide his valuable insight. Please help me welcome Dr. Koroshetz.
Well, thanks very much, and it's great to see old friends. We've been at this for a while, and we're not going to give up. And I think we're making progress, and so I'd like to just say a couple of things. First of all, I think it's people to know what epilepsy is. so they can communicate it. I would offer that at the basis of epilepsy is the fact that the brain circuits, instead of doing their symphony, are basically just hitting the drums and the symphony goes away. So what we have to try and do is to kind of prevent that transition to beating the drum and continuing the symphony. And the brain is really quite amazing in the things that it can do when it's not disrupted. So why bring that up? I think the reason I'm really excited now is because we never were really able to map these circuits that go awry in epilepsy. We were able to monitor activity with EEG over the top of the head, but it was very kind of a crude example of what's going on inside the brain. So in fact, you can't get an EEG and somebody look at it and say, yeah, you have epilepsy or not, unless you're actually having a seizure during the EEG. So, but we learned a lot by the advances in epilepsy surgery, where people would then go into the brain and record from inside the brain. And then you see exactly what's going on. You do it with these little electrodes, and you measure the large populations of neurons. You never can see the individual ones. And the reason I bring this up is because we have this thing called the Brain Initiative, which has been running now for about 8 years, and it is about a $680 million a year project to map, monitor, and modulate brain circuits. And when we started this in 2014, we thought this was going to be a great idea. We're going to learn a lot. We got completely blown out of the water. What has happened in this project is unbelievable. No one could have ever expected what has actually come out of this. So I was at a talk yesterday at the Society for Neuroscience where in an animal, they can make the brain transparent, and they can label every single neuron that might be involved in a seizure. And they have a computational model that can go through the whole brain in a couple of minutes and locate every single neuron that's involved in a seizure. Now the question is, well, now that you can do that, how would you be able to turn off seizures? Well, in animals, you can inject a virus that contains a gene that will shut off neurons when they start to seize. So you can just think about, the actual impact of this is exactly what we would like to do. Is now really possible in an animal. We have to figure out how to get that into humans, but having done it in animals, you can bet your bottom dollar there's really smart people going to figure out how to do that in humans. How long it's going to take, not entirely clear, because it takes a lot of steps to make sure these things would be safe to do. But I think that's, you can actually see that in the future, this is something that is going to stop seizures, and as opposed to medicine, which you have to take all the time, and they have their side effects because you're trying to affect one type of neuron and you end up affecting another one. Like he said, the side effects are, it's a good question. Sometimes the side effects may not be worth it. But here we're talking about potentially precise targeting of just the cells involved in epilepsy. So I want to just throw that out as the kind of thing that just motivates me to think that there is a cure at the end of this line that could be for all of epilepsy. But as I said, it's still a long time coming. We are working to develop gene therapies for really rare diseases that basically destroy the life of a child. And these are dangerous, but given the alternatives, they seem ethically reasonable to try. So that's kind of our inroad into developing the way of getting these genes into the brain. And that's happening in multiple different diseases. There are certainly genomic therapies coming out in epilepsy for some of the mutations. As we know from the big project that NIH funded, Epi4K, where we looked at trios, parents, siblings, people with epilepsy. Surprisingly, we found a lot of mutations, but they're not mutations that are inherited. They're mutations that just come out of the blue when the baby is conceived. But there are now people working on trying to attack each of those mutations in a very specific manner. Some of them with genomic therapies. So the future, I think, on that end, I think looks bright. We have really smart people. We always need more, but there are 25,000 people at the Society of Neuroscience today. So I would go over there and, tell them about epilepsy and get them all to work on epilepsy. Now, on the other hand, the other problem that we have is to think about how do we use the knowledge we have now to help people. And so as a country, it's not ethical to, spend all your time on something for things going to happen 20 years from now and ignore the problems that are standing right in front of us. So trying to get better epilepsy care, I think, is also critically important. And I just wanted to, and we were talking earlier that in the last couple of years, NINDS has done strategic planning in what we call health disparities. And there's a whole issue of the journal Neurology devoted to this. I just wanted to throw out one figure that they estimated the number of Black lives lost due to health inequities is about 30,000 people over the last 10 years. So health inequity is, it's a bad thing, but it actually kills people and it causes people to die that shouldn't die. So it's a tough problem in our country because the healthcare system is so fragmented. But the question is, are there clever ways in which we can make epilepsy care, the standard of care, more available to people, no matter where they live, no matter what their socioeconomic status is. It's not easy. This is not an easy thing in our system to do. But we have grants out now to build community engagement in communities, so that I think you have to kind of do this at a local level. But to build that kind of a research that can make these therapies more available. Now, when I was training in neurology, we had like 3 epilepsy drugs, and now there's 70 different treatments for epilepsy. Some of them are drugs, some of them are, devices. And so we have made progress, but I think there's a big inequity in how they are deployed. Also, I mean, we've done a couple other things to mention. I mean, I think everybody knows what we do, to tell you the truth, but years ago, the question of sudden unexplained death and epilepsy was kind of rose to the top in importance. Prior to that, it really wasn't a lot of work done in that space. But I think through the people around here, it raised a lot of awareness, and so NIH funded a Center Without Walls to kind of address the problem. And it was really, I think, a fantastic group that got together. And the research now in sudden unexplained death and epilepsy is it's all over what we do at NINDS. I was just at a meeting on Saturday of people studying the connections between the brain and the body systems, and there was a great talk about a particular mutation and just understanding how it actually caused sudden death and epilepsy. And I mentioned before, personally, my dad had epilepsy. My dad died during the seizure, so I've always been thinking about that. And also was a neurologist, ran intensive care unit, took care of a lot of people with status epilepticus. So I know kind of the worst situations from that end. And we'd like to do, of course, is to prevent epilepsy. And so our focus now in our epilepsy program has shifted more from finding a new drug to finding a new drug that works where none of the other ones work. So we don't think it's worth the government's investment just to get another drug, a Me Too drug, but we really need to get a drug we call drug-resistant epilepsy, which affects quite a percentage, 30% of adults, 25% of kids. And then we'd like to do prevention. And so the thing that's tantalizing about epilepsy is that you don't have epilepsy. But then you develop a seizure and you still don't have epilepsy until you get more seizures. So the first seizure for certain is a chance to say, okay, here's somebody who's at high risk of epilepsy. What can we do to prevent the disease? They had one seizure. What can we do to prevent this process from getting worse and worse, which is what happens in the brain? And the other way to do it is to try and think about even earlier, people who had some kind of insult, and then they're at high risk for epilepsy, not definite. So we put a big group together to study post-traumatic epilepsy, where you could potentially get at some of the preventative strategies. You have people who had head trauma, you can look at the type of head trauma they had and kind of guess what their chance of epilepsy are. You know, they're not 100%, might be 30%, but you can do studies there to test things to see if you can prevent the epilepsy. And that idea wouldn't necessarily be specific for a head trauma. It would be, how do you stop somebody from going one seizure to having multiple seizures throughout their life? So that, of course, is the cure, is what you're talking about there when you get into prevention. So I just say that at NINDS, hopefully people know we have a really dedicated team. In the epilepsy, we have what's called the Epilepsy Working Group. We work really closely with the foundations every chance we can. The American Epilepsy Society will all be going down there to Orlando. And you know, it's great for us to come and meet with you, because you know, we sit in the offices in front of computers all day, but it's all about the people. And so to see the people again outside of their squares is really great. So I appreciate you inviting me in, and look forward to hearing from the group.
Thank you so much, Dr. Koroshetz, for your information. I think we all learned something today from your remarks. We're going to kick off the panel. And to kick off, I'm going to introduce someone I like to call Jillian Copeland, co-founder of the Epilepsies Action Network, founder of Main Street, and parent and caregiver. Jillian.
Good morning. How are we today? Thank you, Katie. Thank you for your time, attention, and consideration this morning. My name is Jillian Copeland, and I am Nickel's mom. Today, you will hear from our family story, first from Nickel himself, and from our three other sons who are here, and lastly from me. And those of you who know me know I always have a few words, or more than a few words. We hope to paint a picture of what living with epilepsy looks like and feels like, and the significant impact that this condition has had on our family. First up is Nickel. Get a little bit of sound? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yes. Pardon the
Yeah.
My name is Nicholas Copeland. I'm 24 years old, and I have epilepsy. My first seizure was when I was 8 months old, and it was a long one.
Bear with us for just a second, guys. Sorry.
Seizures didn't my name is Nicholas Copeland. I'm 24 years old, and I have epilepsy. My first seizure was when I was 8 months old, and it was a long one. Living with seizures isn't fun. I worry sometimes that I will have one. I have been seizure-free for almost 4 months now, which is a good thing. I take lots of pills. In the morning and at night, so I don't have a seizure. But sometimes I do, and it isn't fun. After I have a seizure because of all my meds, I feel drowsy and sounds really bad. One of my things is we drive alone one day, live independently, get my own house one day and find a cure for epilepsy. Thank you, Nicholas Copeland.
Hard to follow that, right? So Nickel, as you heard, is 24 years old, and you can see he's absolutely adorable. His mom here. And while he is a happy adult, he has lived with this condition. We have lived with this condition for 24 years. And it hasn't been easy, and we are the lucky ones. As you heard from Nickel himself, he had his first seizure when he was 8 months old. It was over 2 hours long. And that began, you look like you're gonna cry, honey. That's why I'm up here, because he's the crier. But we'll see if I can get through this. That began our epilepsy journey, which has included more than 150 seizures, brain surgery, EEGs, EKGs, doctor visits, countless emergency room visits, and trials of many, many different epilepsy and other medications. Our journey has consisted of thousands of hours of medical interventions, language, psychological, occupational, behavioral, and learning interventions, and also included a specialized school that my husband and I founded for Nickel because we couldn't find a school to meet his needs. Epilepsy has provided so many learning, attention, and behavioral challenges that most educators weren't and still are not equipped to provide what is needed for a successful experience and outcome. Nickel was able to attend our school for 6 years, the Diener School located in Rockville, Maryland, and was surrounded by educators who challenged and nurtured him and could medicate him when he had a seizure. Much of our family life has revolved around seizures. Because epilepsy is unpredictable and life-threatening for Nickel and many other children and adults, people with this condition and their family members often experience fear, anxiety, and trauma-related issues. The uncertainty of this condition impacts every aspect of daily life, every aspect of our daily lives, and often requires therapeutic interventions, not just to treat the seizures, but to treat the anxiety and fear that comes with. This is an uncertain and unpredictable condition, and it is a family condition. To understand that better, I have asked our sons, Danny, Jack, and Ethan, to share how it feels to live with a brother with epilepsy. Let's come on up.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ethan Copeland, and I'm the youngest brother of the four. I cannot express my appreciation to you all for being here today, as epilepsy has affected our family more than you know. I remember the first time I saw Nickel have a seizure like it was yesterday. I was 8 years old. Nicholas was 10. Our parents were not home, and we were sitting on the couch, probably watching and eating something that my parents would not approve of. But we took advantage of the opportunity. Enjoying the snacks and the entertainment, I looked over at my older brother and saw him unresponsive, foaming at the mouth and head shaking back and forth. I immediately lunged out of my chair and rushed to our babysitter, Rose, screaming for help. I had no idea what was going on with my brother, and I remember thinking to myself, is he dying in front of my eyes right now? I can't remember how the situation was handled from that point on. I blacked out. What I do remember from that day is his face during the seizure. I do remember how I felt during his seizure and the sudden worry associated with it. Growing up as Nichols' younger brother was not always easy. I quickly learned about his epilepsy and saw many seizures throughout the remainder of my life. I remember growing up and having second guesses about inviting friends over to my house. What if Nickel had a seizure in front of them? What would I do? What would my friends say? Nickel's epilepsy taught us how to act and respond quickly. While the anxiety and worry surrounding Nickel's epilepsy will always be a part of our family's being, we are the lucky ones. We are connected, supportive, and as brothers will always be there for Nickel throughout his ups and downs.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jack Copeland. I'm the second of the four. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. It means a lot to us. So you've now heard from Nickel about living with epilepsy and from Ethan about what it's like as a family member with epilepsy. And what I want to focus on is the ripple effect that comes when someone has epilepsy. Seizures seem like isolated events that have a beginning and an end. However, if you're a family member of someone with epilepsy, you know that it doesn't always feel like that. They affect every aspect of our day, every day, from planning who Nickel will be with to forming a course of action if a seizure were to occur at any given moment. Epilepsy is always at the top of our minds. The concern and uneasiness of caretakers of those with epilepsy lasts much longer than the seizure does. In fact, it never ends, and it is a day-to-day source of anxiety. Epilepsy also reverberates through time, forcing us to consider every if and when to ensure that whatever the future brings, including when my parents are no longer around, we will find a way to make sure that Nickel stays safe.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Copeland. I'm the oldest of the four. Being an older brother to a kid with epilepsy has taught me many amazing lessons. I've learned the priceless value of good health, a supportive family unit, accountability, and enjoying the little moments. I am forever grateful for these lessons I've learned through Nickel. However, they do not come free of consequences. These consequences include increased stress and anxiety, constant uncertainty, and sadly, a lingering fear of what the next moment might bring. Like Jack said, and for me too, perhaps my biggest fear is what life looks like when my parents are no longer around. How are my brothers and I going to make sure Nickel is just okay? These responsibilities, these thoughts, they are not hypothetical. They are real and they are heavy. My brothers and I are fortunate in the fact that we have resources and loved ones that will help us tackle these responsibilities. But we also recognize most families are not so fortunate. Life can become totally overwhelming when you find yourself in fear for your brother's health. In fact, for his life itself at times. Access to resources and support are so instrumental in improving the life of an individual with epilepsy and also in enhancing the life of their loved ones.
When Nickel was younger, we checked on him through the night. When he had bouts with and/or clustered seizures, a bed was moved into our room so we could observe him through the night. This could last months, even years. During the day, we knew and still do. In fact, my phone just buzzed and it took every ounce of me not to go check it, but Scott's here and I think his would buzz if I don't answer mine. During the day, we knew and still do know where our child is at all times. We know what he's doing and we know who's with him, and we ensure that they are trained so that they understand how to treat his seizure. Additionally, I always know, where the closest hospital is in case I get the call. The calls always came. Sadly, they still do. Right after Nickel filmed that video, yet another incident. So that 4 months then turned into day one again to start over. And that's how this works. The calls always came from family caregivers, brothers, babysitters, grandmothers, camps, you name it. Jillian, they would say, Nickel is having a seizure, or, sorry, little post-trauma or current trauma. Nickel's okay, but he just had a seizure. And of course, there's an issue. Any moms in the room ever gotten a there's an issue call? It's not fun. I even remember actually collapsing in a school hallway one time after getting the call. At some points in our life, it seemed like we were always getting the call. I even had a unique ringtone for his school on my phone. And when I heard the tone, get the call, my heart feels like it stops. My breathing becomes labored and my prayers start. Please let him be okay. And so far he has been okay. And we are the lucky ones. Epilepsy does not recognize holidays. There was the call on Halloween, the call on Thanksgiving, over the Christmas holidays while Nickel was swimming in a pool. There was the day where Nickel dressed in his fancy clothing, which he loves to do, for his elementary school Valentine's Day dance. And of course, the call came. After a few minutes of the dance, Nickel had a seizure. He didn't have much of memory from that evening, but the next morning when he woke up all hazy from the rescue meds flooding his system to rescue his body and mind, he said, "Mom, did I even get to go to the dance?" And other questions from Nickel. Why did God give me these? Why did he make me like this? Or will there ever be a day when I don't have a seizure? We are privileged in so many ways. We have the resources to visit any doctor we choose, consulting with doctors around the country, leaving no rock unturned. We are so fortunate to have a village of friends and family who lift us up. They support us in times of need, and they love us almost as much as they love Nickel. We have 4 outstanding sons who have a unique and supportive brotherly love. And there's a lot of relief in that. We are fortunate as we can and have explored and benefited from many different therapies, strategies, options, approaches, and of course, medicines. And boy, have we explored meds. Currently, Nickel is on 5 anti-seizure meds. We weaned him off 1 just in the last year. He's on anxiety meds, psychotropics. He naps every day because the medication interaction causes drowsiness. In fact, he should be getting up in about 20 minutes. A full life of meds since he was 8 months old. And you saw just how many he takes. That's his morning, the same at night. And after every seizure or behavioral issue, we up the meds, we add meds, we mix meds, we change the meds, which comes with doctor visits, blood tests. And every medicine or addition of every medicine comes with a big fat, I just don't know. I just don't know if this will work. And I don't know what the side effects will be with these drug interactions. And this comes from every amazing and frustrated doctor that we have worked with. And there have been many. They just don't know because they don't have the answers. We leave every visit, every appointment feeling cautiously optimistic. Luckily, that comes in our DNA. This is going to be the one that helps our child. Doctors often tell us to have hope. Have hope because we are the lucky ones. Only 50% of people, as you heard from the doctor, living with epilepsy respond to medication. And responding to epilepsy medication means that there's a reduction in seizures, or some might become seizure-free for a period of time. When medications work, it's usually a temporal remedy. It's not a cure. And it takes much time and many trials to become stable on meds. We have had bouts, months, and sometimes years being seizure-free. And that has been a gift. And we start living life a little, and then boom, the balloon pops, the call comes. It's another seizure. And once again, quite literally, our breath, or what feels like our breath, is taken away. And we just hope it doesn't take his. And the seizure roller coaster continues. The epileptologist, neurologist, psychiatrist, pediatrician, psychopharmacologist, every doctor we consult with tells us there just isn't enough information out there. Why is that? I often wonder. With 3.5 million Americans suffering from epilepsy and 500,000 are children, with genetic testing and so much data available and so many incredible people working on this, why aren't we moving forward with epilepsy? Where is the urgency? With so many people living a life like this and so many people dying from this. That is my question to you. When my son asks me, Mom, I'm the one who's supposed to protect him. And when he asks me the question next time, which he always asks me right after his next seizure, will there be a day where I don't have seizures? I want to answer, yes, Nicole, there will be a day. We founded the Epilepsy Action Network because we have watched the severe impacts to Nicole, his brothers, and our family for the past 24 years. We have watched the numbers rise to 1 in 26 people living with epilepsy. And why aren't we talking about it? Because the shame and stigma is there. We are not funding research or enough research to help Nicole, people like Nicole, and the attention and urgency that this condition deserves. And the research we are funding is not effectively translating to patient care and improved health outcomes. Here in the United States of America, we can do better, and we should do better for these families like ours, all across America, all across this country battling this condition called epilepsy. Please help our son. Please help me say yes to Nicole. I want to tell him that one day he's not going to have seizures anymore. Please help my family and the nearly 4 million others suffering from this horrible and unpredictable condition called epilepsy. Thank you for your time, attention, and for your consideration.
Jillian, thank you so much for sharing your story and for your son sharing their story. And I did see Scott drop his hair in the back. I'd be remiss not to acknowledge my own family that's here today. My sister, Martina Johnson, is in the audience. And my cousin, who is more like a brother, William Timothy Miles, is in the audience today. And I saw my sister nodding as you told your story, understanding what that felt like to watch her sister have a seizure. So I really just thank you for your vulnerability and for your story today. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to welcome Gardner Lapham. I'm going to pronounce your name right, Gardner. I promise I will. Okay. Gardner is the chair of the Partners Against Mortality and Epilepsy, or PAMI, and she is a parent and an advocate. Welcome, Gardner.
And I don't think I possibly stand up here after that. Julian, that was amazing. And I'm going to ball because of your story. But Scott and Jillian, thank you for all you've done to launch this caucus. And you boys rock. It disappeared, I think, but you guys are amazing, amazing brothers. Thank you so much for that. So good morning. So I want to thank the Epilepsy Caucus for hosting this briefing today. I'm so grateful that the 3.4 million Americans living with epilepsy now have a voice in Congress that can advocate for their needs. He said, I'm Gardner Lapham, and this is Henry. He was my firstborn child. He was everything a mom could want: healthy, joyful, and loving. Henry experienced a few febrile seizures at the age of 3, seizures that were brought on by a fever and illness. They were terrifying to watch, but we were told they weren't dangerous and he'd grow out of them. However, after Henry turned 4, he began to have seizures that were not associated with a fever. He was soon diagnosed with epilepsy, but before he had a chance to become therapeutic on his medications, Henry died in his sleep. It was totally out of the blue. We had no idea one could die from a seizure. This was 15 years ago. I'm still haunted by that cool morning when I found Henry in his bed. I'm also haunted because so many families like ours still don't know the risks of living with epilepsy. So it turns out Henry died from something that we'd never heard of. It's called SUDEP, or sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. SUDEP is defined as the death of a person with epilepsy that's not caused by injury, drowning, or other known causes. We know that 1 in 1,000 people living with epilepsy will die each year from SUDEP. That number increases dramatically to 1 in 150 for people with uncontrolled seizures. Research is ongoing to try and understand the underlying causes of this phenomenon. Remarkably, SUDEP is more common than SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And although every new parent learns about SIDS, more parents of kids with epilepsy are never educated about the risk of SUDEP and how to possibly prevent it. Of all the leading neurological disorders, SUDEP is the number 2 cause of potential life years lost, behind only stroke. Turns out that SUDEP exacts a pretty staggering toll when you look at the total number of deaths over the total potential years that should have been lived. Though SUDEP happens to people of all ages, people in their younger years seem to be at greatest risk. Many of us remember Cameron Boyce, who was an extremely talented and successful actor known for his roles in various TV shows, such as the Disney hit series Jessie. Cameron's family, like ours, was blindsided by SUDEP. They have created the Cameron Boyce Foundation to honor his legacy and are doing remarkable work to advance awareness and research. I'm especially grateful to Cameron's family for sharing his story so publicly and for giving me the permission to share this slide today. As we all know, important issues can be overlooked or misunderstood, and it's not until someone with prominence speaks out on the issue that we begin to understand it. So there are several causes of premature death in epilepsy. SUDEP is not the only one, but it does account for more than half of epilepsy-related deaths. People with epilepsy have a 3 times greater risk of premature mortality than the general population. And globally speaking, epilepsy claims more than 125,000 lives a year. The good news is many of these deaths could be prevented. Epilepsy, especially the SUDEPs. If we work smarter, we could save lives right now and make these numbers smaller. Increased federal investment would go a long way. These are the 3 areas I believe public funding could help most. First, we need provider education programs so doctors and nurses are better equipped to assess SUDEP risk and provide appropriate patient counseling. Currently, education around seizure control for whoever it is possible and seizure monitoring are our best prevention tools. Secondly, we need enhanced surveillance so we better understand this problem, who it happens to, and its true scope. And finally, while NIH has made incredible inroads in driving SUDEP research, and I'm especially grateful to Dr. Koroshetz for his leadership at NINDS, we still need additional funding to get at the underlying causes of SUDEP, as well as the predictive biomarkers, which would allow for the development of better prevention strategies. So I've been working on this issue for almost as long as Henry's been gone. Soon after Henry died, I met Susan Axelrod, an amazing mom and advocate. She and other moms like Jean Donalty inspired me to get involved and turn my grief into action. After many years of working with Susan and Jean at Cure Epilepsy, I now focus my attention in 2 areas. I oversee a portfolio of epilepsy projects that our family foundation supports. Specifically, we support efforts to prevent SUDEP in the U.S. as well as efforts to narrow the horrific treatment gap in the rest of the world, especially Africa, where 80% of people are living with no treatment whatsoever. But my true passion is working alongside other bereaved parents, people living with epilepsy, advocates, healthcare providers, and research on an initiative called PAMI, or Partners Against Mortality and Epilepsy. PAMI convenes, educates, and inspires all stakeholders to promote understanding and drive prevention of epilepsy-related mortality. And each year we hold a conference, organize educational events, and convene committees around topics of importance. And we build a community of people who want to realize change. It's a powerful collaboration. So in closing, I continue to be saddened, humbled. In closing, I continue to be saddened, humbled, and angered by every new person I learn about whose life was cut too short by SUDEP. These are some of the more recent pictures posted on PAMI's Facebook page. I don't know their individual stories, but I do know they all died too young and could have had a better chance of survival if we had attacked the magnitude of this problem sooner. But we have a chance now, and I know that together we can save many future lives. The promise of increased research and improved clinical care gives me great hope that one day a person with epilepsy will not have to live in fear of having a seizure, let alone succumbing to its worst possible outcome. Thank you all for listening today, for your commitment to epilepsy.
Clarke, thank you for your amazing work in this day, for your tirelessly efforts to advocate on behalf of families who have lost loved ones to SUDEP. It is truly inspiring. Our final speaker today is Dr. David Clarke, Chief of the Comprehensive Pediatric Epilepsy Program at the University of Texas, Austin, Dell Children's Hospital. Welcome, Dr. Clarke.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the epilepsy community for allowing me to play a very small part in this awareness campaign. It's extremely important. A little bit of a back history. I'm from a country that's less than 100,000 people. And as of 4 years ago, we had not had a neurologist, we had not had an MRI, we had not had a CT scan. We have those now. But I'd just like to say that there are thousands of Antiguas in the United States. So independent of what is happening globally, which I'm very well aware, right here in the US, we need to make a change. So I'm going to be discussing improving access, the urgent need for research, education, and intervention. I will not tell my story in this because persons hear stories are more important and the voices need to be heard. But I'd just like to tell you that with all the scientific advances, etc., there are huge swaths of the population that have no access, have no voice, are unheard, and are not a part of that research community. You have seen this prior, 50 million persons with epilepsy, estimated 500,000 people affected with epilepsy, and you heard from several today. We've heard the 1 in 26, and with the new definitions of epilepsy, that may be even higher. 3.5 million persons in the US, 500,000 kids affected. Neurocognitive, psychosocial, physical, and I can go on, but you've heard many of those. This is striking. It's estimated that every hour, 5 persons die from epilepsy. So while we are in here, about 5 to 10 people will die from epilepsy. And that's not touching the fiscal constraints. But let's just look at a throughput. So you have someone that has one seizure, be that person in Appalachia, rural community in Texas, etc. And that person has to find somewhere to go. The individual has to diagnose that is a seizure, figure out what medication to put that person on. If they can see a neurologist, fine. If they can't, that's difficult. If they have another, they need to choose that medicine. And once they choose that medicine, getting from there through neurology, if you fail more than 2 medicines, all the way to the epilepsy center, that should take about 1 to 3 years. They eventually get to the center, but education doesn't go in the other way. So they go back to the communities, they see someone else, they end up in the emergency room, they end up getting on another medication, and it goes on and on. And as a matter of fact, it can take up to 17 plus years for them to get much of what they need for diagnosis and care. So you're looking at 1 to 17 to sometimes, pending the study, up to 23 years. You know, I'm not going to compare it to other conditions because if you have a condition, it's always serious for you. But the fact of the matter is, if you should take 1 year, but you're taking 15 plus years in any condition, that's not only a problem, but that's a very acute problem. Epilepsy care is determined by where you live, globally and in the US. This is a study that looked at epilepsy centers, Ellen, Barbara, accredited centers, of which I'm a part, which is fantastic. But those centers are in specific areas. They have 8 states without centers at all. And as a matter of fact, the disadvantaged communities, centers tend not to be in. That was not always so. But more and more centers are going towards more lucrative areas, and then persons have to get to them. And then the persons that are most affected are underinsured, those living outside the Northeast or West, or the few regions where these centers occur. Epilepsy care is determined by who you are. Only about 1/3 of persons that should see a neurologist of this 25,000 plus saw a neurologist. If you're older, race and ethnicity, if you're in a low density area, as a matter of fact, of many persons in here, if you have complex epilepsy care, it restricts access. It doesn't improve access. Misdiagnosis is great, both for epilepsy and for those not having epilepsy. It causes unwarranted medications, less mobility, reduced productivity, compromises learning, affects quality of life. And as Ann Paduri suggested, and we could just put anything within testing here, but specifically, when should genetic testing be performed? Who should perform it? Who knows the type of testing? Even if you go to 4th level epilepsy centers, the centers are not the same. So we have these hurdles that we need to overcome. What you have the primary care physicians or providers, you have the neurologists, you have the epileptologists and 4th level epilepsy centers, and they're not speaking the same tune. So there are all these delays and innuendos. And what tends to happen is the persons that suffer are the persons with epilepsy. And epilepsy care is determined by who you are. So if you are underinsured or uninsured, if you're Black, Hispanic, Latino, Native American, Pacific Islander, especially First Nation, Native Americans, they're almost unheard of frequently. But if you're any of these groups, multiple studies have shown that there's a reduction in time to surgery, time to care, time to medication. There are multiple intervening variables there. And many of the organizations have advocated for more inclusivity, which is extremely important. Because if you don't have that voice, quite often you're not heard. But more important, if you don't have that voice, you can't speak for yourself. So you have others speaking for you without the nuances of history, systemic causes, et cetera, et cetera. Huge problem. And what happens here is they are connected. But you have even more innuendos for these patients and families. You know, I spoke about Appalachia. If you are in some remote places in, say, Alaska, the Dakotas, for instance, and elsewhere, and you're trying to get to an epilepsy center, even virtually, timely, it's almost impossible. And that transcends race, color, or creed. So you have this vast difference in care, and then you just have things piling up. And every time you pull one, something else pops in. Now, you never want to end on a negative note because things are being done. You have the Institute of Medicine 2012, and we're making some inroads. But again, the push is, how do you reduce the disparities? How do you bring everyone along on that train and not have the train go from A to C and forget about B? That's a problem. And more recently, the Intersectoral Global Action Plan. Very similarly, nationally, as alluded to, you have a swath of the populations of Eastern Bloc Europe, Africa, Asia, Caribbean, that just don't have that care. So it's almost a parallel. You have folks within each country, so it's inter and intra-country deficits. And we have to try and move that needle and improve that curve. But there are benefits that we're missing. We're missing timely interventions because timely interventions save lives. We heard about SUDEP, nocturnal seizures, genetic predispositions. But also timely intervention saves resources. Medicine versus surgery versus the diet. You definitely have a reduction in persons going to the emergency room, a reduction in persons going to inpatient services, and research, improved access, timely intervention, all of it reduces costs in the long run. That has been proven over and over again. Well, you see, knowledge is suggested as power, but only action facilitates that change. So if we don't do something, we can have all the knowledge. It has to be implemented, as you mentioned, God. The implementation is key. So this is rather small, but very important, I think. You have great researchers trying to get the resources. They educate at our national meetings and the other meetings. They work in great NAC-related and non-NAC-related centers to advocate that care. The care advocated are for advocacy organizations, for parents and families. And in turn, the circle is complete with the researchers being pushed to do more research. The problem is if you pull out finances out of that chain and you don't give a driving force for that research, then you're going to deplete the circle. And eventually, it breaks down the entire circle. So you're going to break down that advocacy, break down that advanced care. So what I'm saying here today is, as a core group, we have no choice but to work together. Because clearly the problem is acute. There's an acute problem. There's an urgent problem. It has been acute. Usually in this talk, I go all the way back to W.E.B. Du Bois in 1906, who said the exact same thing. So if we're saying the same thing since 1906, and we're here now in the 2020s, what's missing? There's an issue. And every about 30 years and more, you get call to action. NINDS, CDC, NIH, they have always laid out a really nice roadmap of what should be done. And we try to do it, but we're missing a link of the chain. We have to advocate for improved access. And I won't keep you any longer. I'll just tell everyone to advocate this month for epilepsy awareness, but I really appreciate you guys.
How long is this supposed to go on?
I don't know.
Okay. I'm in no hurry. I'm just starting to prepare a few things.
People have told their story, so it's.
I'm going to take away two words, advocacy and urgency, from your conversation with us today. Thank you so much for your remarks. It is clear from our speaker stories and so many more people's experience that the epilepsy community needs are vast and multifaceted. We seek solutions in many policy areas, but today, 54 organizations speak with one voice to urge certain funding levels for critical epilepsy research and programs in the final fiscal year 2024 budget. Please share the letter with your representatives. These increased investments are necessary to fuel needed progress and improve outcomes for all people with epilepsies. We also, of course, urge all U.S. representatives to join the Congressional Epilepsy Caucus. There is not an epilepsy caucus in the Senate yet, but we are planning to initiate that work in the near future. Since it is National Epilepsy Awareness Month, we want to emphasize the importance of everyone becoming certified in seizure first aid. As we heard, it can save a life. Seizures can happen anywhere at any time. Knowing how to help someone during a seizure makes all the difference. On the slide, we provided places where you can find and take free seizure first aid training courses. We have one final honored guest before we open it up for question and answer. Please help me welcome longtime epilepsy champion and one of our newest Epilepsy Caucus members who is not with us. So many signals from around the room. So with that, I would like to open it up for question and answer for our panel. Any questions for our panel? Yes.
Sure. My name is Cecile Dam, and I'm with the Pediatric Epilepsy Surgery Alliance. And I was glad to see surgery mentioned a few times here. I think it's important to understand that for those 30% who don't react to medication, surgery is the best option as today. But it's also the only medical area that I know of where removing half the brain of a baby is accepted as a form of treatment.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's the only area that I know of where removing half of the brain of a baby is accepted as a form of treatment. And I think we need to do better. Our personal story here is Courtney, right? My son was 18 months old when we removed half of the brain. So we clearly need more research, more funding to educate families that it is still an option, and we're glad that we had it, but we need to find other solutions for our kids. Thank you.
We have a question, comment. We have one here and here.
Yes, I wonder if we can go, William Miles in Congressman Davis's office. I wonder if we could go into more detail in terms of what epilepsy and healthcare management looks like for those on Medicaid. Availability of specialists, will often challenge low reimbursement rates, inability to find care across illnesses. And I'm wondering if that's sort of the same schema with epilepsy also.
Dr. Clarke, would you like to take that?
Sure. Across the board. So you find reduced access. Quite often they don't get the correct medications. Whether you live in a rural area, you don't live in a rural area, you don't have enough access to neurologists and epileptologists, primarily with federally insured. You have a longer wait time for surgery. and a longer wait time across the board. So you're totally correct. It's not solely epilepsy. And it's not solely other conditions. Bottom line, it's a problem.
Thank you. I think we have one question here.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming in. How does like the larger scheme of epilepsy funding work for people that have more functional seizures that aren't stemming from the brain, have no physical cause, but still very much impact their daily lives?
Not enough. So even within institutions, and me and my colleagues speak about it, I've been fortunate that we have a functional seizure clinic with a colleague of mine with neuropsych support, etc. Not everywhere has that. I think collaboration has been growing in that sphere and awareness that it is as important, but you're correct, not enough.
And so I would ask that at the Epilepsy Foundation, you're asking about those with functional seizures, such as myself. What does that look like? It looks like support for the psychosocial impact of epilepsy. Epilepsy affects every part of your life. 80% of individuals living with epilepsy live with depression. So we have to begin to invest in mental health services for those living with epilepsy as well. Are there any other questions? Yes, we have one here.
I'm Dick Schmidt. I just wanted to thank everyone on the panel today for your very, very informative remarks. I actually have epilepsy myself, although I haven't had a seizure in 25 years. It was a result of brain surgery that occurred 26 years ago. With good care, I should put a plug in here for the good care I received at Johns Hopkins and still do. But it was extraordinarily informative, everything everyone said, and very, very touching and heart-wrenching to hear these stories. And I think that the advocacy is so important. And so if we can just take one message out of here, it's let's get to work and get something done on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Because we really are trying to make sure that everyone experiences seizure control. And we all can do that through advocacy and continued funding in this area. Yes, another question.
Hi, yes, Gabi Conacher. Dr. Koroshetz, I have a quick question for you. I feel like this is a good space to maybe bring up the fact that funding right now, we know for NIH is very at risk. And I would love for you to speak to maybe what is potentially on the table if we do not, as a community, do more advocacy to say we need more funding for NIH and the programs that are really working to help us do translational work to find better, as you said, better cures, better treatments for those living with epilepsy.
Right, so yeah, I have to get a little bit into the weeds. So bear with me for a second, but the budgets that we're looking at, the best situation we can imagine if we had is a flat budget. There's no increase. No one I've heard of thinks we're going to get an increase. So it turns out that when you fund projects at NIH, the first year you fund the project, it's actually less expensive than the ensuing years. So that means we've already funded projects that are going to increase in cost. That reduces our ability to fund new grants from our base budget by about $70 million. So we fund about 300 million of new grants every year, and this would be a gigantic reduction. So that's kind of where we stand. Now, the other problem is that, and I hope that this is a technical issue, but the BRAIN initiative that I mentioned before is getting money from two separate sources. One source goes up, and last year they reduced the other source. Next year that source goes down, and they didn't increase the source, which is the base budget. So the BRAIN initiative from the House language gets cut by $280 million. So we don't know what's going to happen, but there's technical issues, and then there's the bigger issue in the country of where people want to put the money. But right now, I think everybody in NIH is working on cutting back substantially. We fund grants They come in, they get reviewed, they get a score, then they get ranked. And we fund the last couple of years, we've been able to fund to the 14th percentile, which means 86% of the grants don't get funded. And that's a good year. But next year we had to reduce it. The current year we had to reduce it to 11% because just get ready for a flat budget. We got a cut and we're just gonna have to do some drastic stuff. Yeah.
Yes, another question in the back. Hi, yes, this is Laura Livers from Cure Epilepsy. Walter, that's frightening, frankly, to think about what that will happen, what that will do to our research enterprise in this country. Can you or anybody else on the panel speak to actions that we as a community should be taking?
Not unless they want to go to jail.
Anybody else?
Tell you guys what to do. But yeah, I mean, we can just tell you what the story is, but we can't advocate.
Is there anybody else on the panel who might want to share their thoughts?
So I'm sure quite to get to my thoughts. It may be at risk also, but it's this one.
Mike's not working.
Here we go. That's it. Yeah, no, I think the drive coming from families, I'll wait. But I think the drive coming from families are extremely important. But my concern is we have to drive together. I think family organizations, physician organizations, advocacy groups, if we can somehow figure out how to speak with that one voice, it's much stronger.
Totally agree. And while public funding is essential to getting us across the finish line, private funding is also really important. And so we need to dig in that much harder and support groups like Cure Epilepsy and the Epilepsy Foundation to fund innovative research that the federal government can't be doing right now.
We're coming to the end of our session today, and before we end, I'd like to bring forward Congressman Steny Hoyer from Maryland's District 5 for final comments. Welcome.
Sorry I was late. We had a caucus meeting just now talking about the labor health bill, which I know is of interest to all of you, and talking about the total inadequacy of that bill and why we're all going to vote no on the rule and no on the bill. Dr. Clarke, have you watched the Congress? Speaking with one voice apparently is impossible.
A dream.
A dream, but it would be an appropriate dream. But Dr. Clarke, I didn't hear your full comments because when I came in, but speaking with one voice is important. Reaching consensus for the Congress is important, but it's also important for advocacy. Because when we hear a cacophony of voices, we're confused because somebody who is very passionate about something says, this is the way to do it. And somebody equally passionate and equally of goodwill says, no, this is the way to do it. And the Congress, of course, in a larger sense, is having trouble reaching consensus and having trouble acting, and we have not passed a single appropriation bill. And it is a failure of the Congress, a failure of the process, and I would say a failure to meet an agreement that we had back in the earlier part of the year, where Biden and McCarthy agreed, and the Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats agreed on a number. That number was perhaps not adequate, but in terms of reaching consensus so we could move forward, it was important to do so. However, unfortunately, as you know, a week later, that agreement was abandoned. And therefore, because we have no top line, which was the agreement, we are unable to move forward in a unified way. We're going to have a vote in just a few seconds. I don't know I don't know, they're gonna start right at 10:30, but they're close to that. And I believe the rule may fail, which means we won't consider the labor health bill. Now, nobody expected the labor health bill to pass anyway. But I'm here and I've got some remarks, but I'm not gonna make them because we're gonna have a vote pretty soon and you've been here for some time. And I don't know who turned up the thermostat to 90 degrees. My office, which is in the Longworth House office building on the 7th floor, it's either too hot or too cold. You're in the too hot stage here. I'm not saying anything about hot flashes, but there we are, right here. I am involved with the Epilepsy Foundation, have been, because my wife Judy had epilepsy. And we were in Geneva on the lake. She had a teacup in her hand and it fell out of her hand for no apparent reason. And that's when we learned. And Judy was then probably in her 40s. So it was a late diagnosis of epilepsy. But I understand somebody told me he was going to be on TV or Tony Quello. Where's Tony?
He's on the Zoom.
Where is he on the Zoom? Oh, right here. Hello, Tony. You're on the Zoom, but you're not audible, huh? Are you on mute? Tony Quello is the hero of epilepsy in America, in my opinion, and indeed in the world. One of the most energetic, most insightful, and most effective spokespersons that people with disabilities, and epilepsy is perceived as a disability. Tony is epileptic, and he was not allowed to be a priest, which he was pursuing initially. And that was the bad news and the good news, because he couldn't pursue being a priest. He came to the Congress of the United States and made an extraordinary difference. Raised consciousness, provided for legislation which would have reasonable accommodations and would try to deal with the prejudice that exists. We're making a lot of progress in all areas of health care, but progress in epilepsy. But Dr. Clarke, as you said, we need to speak with one voice. This budget is unacceptable because it badly underfunds not just research on epilepsy, but basic biomedical research across the board. Cancer, heart, lung, blood, you name it. And so what we need to speak with is a voice of how much difference the research is making, how much progress we're making, but how much more progress we could make if we had adequate funding. When I was on, I'm now on the Labor Health Committee, which oversees this budget. I was on it for 23 years before I became the #2 leader on our party, which therefore didn't serve on a committee. But pay lines, and then some of you may know what pay lines are, they're the number of research and how high up you can go, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, we really don't reach that level. But when I was on the committee, the first stint, early on, the pay lines were in the 30s, which meant that you were funding 3 out of 10 research grants applications. And most experts will tell you at least probably 40% are really good science. In the not too distant future, and now we are skating on single digit pay lines. Single digit pay lines. That means we're leaving about 25% good science, which has very good opportunities of success on the table. Ted Agnew, the governor of Maryland, you might remember that name. He became vice president of the United States and ended in somewhat of shame, not unshame. But he was a progressive governor of our state, interesting enough. And his first inaugural address, and I was just elected to the Senate in 1966, and he said, the cost of failure far exceeds the price of progress. I want you to repeat that in your mind. Cost of failure far exceeds the price of progress. Congress. In other words, if you don't fix your roof, you're going to have a lot more expense in the days ahead. Perfect Douglas said it in another way, and I'm into education. My wife was a teacher, and I think educators are the most important people in our society. Said that it is easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. Today, you would have said men and women. But the concept is the same. Investing in basic research so that people are prevented from having an illness or cured of an illness, a malady that afflicts them, is a lot less expensive than treating them and losing the contributions they could make. So I want to thank all of you for the work you're doing to raise consciousness, to focus on what we can do and should do, and to be here in this hot room, which you're not thankful for, I understand. And the longer I stay here and talk, I better shut up before we all melt. But it makes a difference. It makes a difference. I know some of you think, oh, one voice does not make a difference. But one voice that is focused and persistent makes a difference. And all of your voices, let's say we have 30 people in this room now, can make a geometric difference. So be of good cheer that what you're doing is and can make a real difference. If you talk to your member of Congress and they perceive you as knowledgeable, sincere, and tenacious, they'll listen. You may not think they listen, and they may dismiss you. They've got a problem, a schedule problem or something, but they will think about it. So, you know, Mrs. Brown or Mr. Jones told me this. With their personal experience, with the experience of their wife, as I do, or their experience with their child or their uncle or their aunt or their nephew or niece, it will make a difference. So I welcome you here. I thank you for being here. I thank you for being focused. And I thank you for the difference that you're going to make in the lives of millions of people, not only here, but around the world. Because what we do at NIH, what we do in America, resonates around the world. The Americans with Disabilities Act that I was honored to play a role in passing, that was Tony Quellos. He passed it on to me after he left the Congress. Has made a difference in hundreds of millions of lives, not just the 47. We've talked about 43, now we talked about 56 or larger with disability. I have a disability. And that's why Abe Poland, who owned the Washington Wizards, never asked me to play center. I'm 6 feet tall, not 7 feet tall. So I don't have the ability to jam the ball. All of us in this room don't have 100% abilities for whatever reasons. All of us can do something. That's what the Disabilities Act is all about. All of us can do something, and we need to empower people to do what they can. And that's what you're doing. And you're focused on one disability. And you're focused on a prejudice. The reason Tony Quello could not be a priest is because they thought he wouldn't be able to do the job. And then he became one of the most productive people I've worked with ever. But the prejudice was that he couldn't. And therefore, at least as far as the priesthood was concerned, he was shut out. You're making a difference by educating people, raising consciousness, not letting that prejudice prevail, and also making a difference so that the affliction of epilepsy will be dealt with in a much more effective way. John Kennedy said, "Let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own." Thank you.